Zelensky to push for more dialogue. Moving on now, and in the latest chapter of the Trump tariff story, the US is set to double tariffs on most imported steel and aluminium starting today. This escalation comes as President Donald Trump expects trading partners to present their best offers to avoid stronger import taxes on other goods, which are scheduled to take effect in early July. Yesterday, Trump signed an executive order to formally implement his recent decision to raise the tariffs on steel and aluminium from 25% to 50%, with the new rates taking effect at 12:01 a.m. today. White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett said that after analysing the data, it became clear that while the initial 25% rate was helpful, a higher tariff was needed to provide additional support to the US steel industry. The tariff increase will apply to all trading partners except the United Kingdom, which has already reached a preliminary trade agreement with the US during a 90-day pause. The UK's tariff rate will remain at 25% until at least July the 9th. About 1/4 of all steel used in the US is imported, with Canada and Mexico being the largest suppliers. They are expected to be hit hardest by the increased tariffs. Canada also dominates the US aluminium import market, exporting roughly twice the amount of the next top exporters combined. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney's office said the country is engaged in intensive negotiations to have these tariffs removed. And lastly, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stated that the administration is monitoring China's adherence to last month's tariff agreement. She made these comments in response to questions regarding China's restrictions on rare earth minerals. Let's have a listen.
Well, I can assure you that the administration is actively monitoring China's compliance with the Geneva Trade Agreement. I know the United States, on our end, we have complied with the terms that we set, and our administration officials continue to be engaged in correspondence with their Chinese counterparts. And as you all know, and I know there's a lot of interest in it, there will be a leader-to-leader talk very soon. And when that happens, as always, we will.
Well, joining us once again to discuss the ongoing tariff tensions is Ross Feingold, political analyst, joining us, of course, from Taipei. Ross, thank you for staying with us. We knew that this was coming, but now confirmed. What will be the impact of the doubling US import duties on steel and aluminium worldwide?
It certainly will raise tensions with some of the US trading partners, perhaps most notably Canada, which does export a lot of steel to the United States. But it might also accelerate the willingness of trade partners to reach a deal with the Trump administration. Look, the Trump administration is being a very tough negotiator here, originally with the Liberation tariffs, now with higher steel and aluminum tariffs, while the Liberation Day tariffs are on pause. But ultimately, a lot of countries are going to be contacting the United States and are going to be looking to make a trade deal with the United States. And hopefully within the coming days and weeks, we will see those negotiations come to fruition with some of the major trading partners.
Yes, Ross, you mentioned there, of course, the Trump administration's stance on trade has very much been pushing countries towards negotiations, but some experts have warned that this could impact American business. Do you think that Trump is thinking about consumers and businesses when he's making these sometimes brash decisions, as we've seen with China and reciprocal tariffs that have escalated out of control at points?
I think President Trump is aware of the impact on American businesses, whether large companies or SMEs, and he's aware of the impact on consumers as well, but that's not changing his approach to trade negotiations with other countries. Also, an important factor to keep in mind here is that part of Trump's end game is to bring more manufacturing back to the United States. And he also understands that manufacturing in the United States often requires importing of raw materials from overseas, and if those raw materials face higher tariffs, it would make it cost prohibitive to manufacture in the United States. So I think he's aware of the risks and the downsides of his strategy, but for now he's sticking with his strategy, and it's to be a very tough negotiator. At least one country, the United Kingdom, has already reached a deal with the United States. We know that many other countries have contacted the United States, and some countries have already held several rounds of talks with the United States. So I think we should look for more deals in the coming days and weeks with the United States from some of its major trading partners.
Yes, Ross, one country that I want to focus on away from the United Kingdom is Canada. We mentioned it earlier in our summary, but of course tensions between the North American neighbours have worsened since the Trump administration took over. We know that Canada is a major exporter of steel and also aluminium to the US. What do you think this move will do for US-Canada relations amid such friction?
The interesting thing there is that there's been a lot of criticism flying back and forth from President Trump or from originally Prime Minister Trudeau and subsequently Prime Minister Carney. But when Trump and Carney have met in person, they seem to get along okay. They don't insult each other when they're meeting one-on-one. So I think there should be optimism. I think Carney understands that there's going to have to be some concessions from Canada in these negotiations. To expand market access in Canada for things like U.S. dairy products. But I would be optimistic that the U.S. and Canada could eventually reach a deal. But there are going to be tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. Trump wants to protect the domestic industry. Will it come down from 50%? Chances are high that it'll come down from 50%, but it's certainly not going to be zero.
Ross, very quickly before we end our discussion, of course, legal action ongoing. We've seen a judge blocking a move from another judge, which was looking at Trump's use of laws to put these tariffs in and trying to check that power. Trump clearly moving on. How will these impact trade discussions that are going on with multiple countries?
I think the negotiations with multiple countries will continue regardless of the litigation in the United States. We don't know how that litigation will ultimately turn out. Arguably, one of the laws that President Trump cited giving him authority to raise tariffs, it doesn't actually give him that authority, but that's going to play out in the courts. There are other laws that President Trump could cite as giving him authority to raise tariffs as well. So the litigation side is far, far from being over. And I think in the meantime, those trading partners will continue to negotiate with the United States and try and reach a deal.
Ross Feingold, thank you ever so much for joining us on the programme. We will, of course,